Today, we are joined by Morgan Thomas, host of the Morgan Thomas Show and the Thursday producer of the Mickey Plyler Show on 105.5 The Roar. Thank you for joining us today, Morgan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And if you're like me, I know I'm excited for some Clemson softball. We dropped an episode this morning, an interview with Coach Bakich, and tonight it's all about Clemson softball. They got a big tournament this weekend, but I know that's softball something that you enjoy. I believe going to games with your daughter, correct?
Yeah, I have a rising 9-year-old. She'll be 9 this month, and so I've been her 8 and under softball coach for the past 3 seasons, and really, taking her to the orange and purple game, taking her to a couple of the games throughout the season. It's really been a daddy-daughter kind of regular event for us.
That's awesome. I think there's a lot of parents and daughters out there doing a lot of that at Clemson softball. You referenced the orange and purple game. I hate that it was on a Sunday. Saturday's weather was so beautiful, and I was just not free to get out there Sunday. How was the game?
Well, I didn't get out there either. Just it's a little bit cold for me, and I got a little. I'm fighting this cold, as you might be able to tell, but trying to take my cough drops and drink some water. But from what I hear, well, I did go to some of the fall ball games that were some of the exhibitions that they had. So I got to see a sneak peek. I couldn't wait until the winter and the spring. I had to see it earlier on, and what I saw there in the glimpses that I had and what I heard from friends that went this past weekend was the long ball is here and it's still here. They haven't forgotten how to hit it. You've got your mainstay, the player of the year, Valerie Cagle, and then you've got someone who I think is really set up for a huge season, and that is Aaliyah Logaleo. I know a lot of buzz is around her right now, and rightfully so. I mean, this is the year for her to kind of get herself on the national scene from a batting perspective and just really show her offensive power. I've seen glimpses of it. We've seen her here and there. More consistency this year would be exciting. I'm seeing that too. And again, you got Mackenzie Clark, big time star center fielder, and the other girls there as well. I do feel like that so far the buzz is the bats are hot.
And you like to hear that too, especially in the final season with Valerie Cagle. You know, she's going to lead a lot of categories there at the plate. So before I had you on, I kind of reviewed a little bit of last season. Um, like the previous 3 seasons, last year was a season where they continued to take a step forward. You host another regional, you make it out to Oklahoma for a super regional. What were your kind of thoughts reflecting back on last season?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned first of all Valerie Cagle's last season. She was on the Roar this morning with Qualk, or this afternoon with Qualk, and it was just so nice to see her. She's kind of a shy person. She doesn't like to get on the radio. She doesn't like to be in front of everybody. They honored her at the football game, and she was kind of just like small waving her hand, and then Rittman was just pumping up the crowd. Really sweet to see, her because she deserves obviously all the praise. A great teammate from what I understand, and a great person. So this final year, I mean, it's hard not to be emotional if you're a Clemson fan, if you're a Clemson grad, if you're just a softball fan in general, to see the player of the year finish up her season at Clemson. I mean, you really pros and cons with that. You really want to, enjoy it, but you also have that pressure of can you do it right for her? Can you send her off on a good note? We'll see. But I know you asked about last season. When you look at last season, I mean, they started off hot. It seemed like they couldn't lose a game for the longest time. And then something that I'm definitely very curious about is one this season compared to last season. I think the schedule, the out of conference schedule, is going to be much more difficult. And also, I feel like where last season started to be a hint of what was to come was that Tennessee game. It was very early on in the season. Tennessee had their star 5-star pitcher at the mound. She's like a true freshman. She's obviously going to be back. They're going to play Tennessee again this year, I believe. But it was a 1-0 loss there, and it was a pitcher's duel back and forth, back and forth. And what ended up happening was this random like chopper, and the chopper got to shortstop, and then it went to first base, and I thought she was out. They called her safe. It kind of got everybody off kilter. And then they ended up kind of dribbling a couple more, I believe, and getting that run in. And that was the run, that made the difference. And when you look back at that, that was a top 10 team at the time, a tournament team there in Tennessee. Clemson, obviously, a tournament team as well. Then when you look at where they played in later on in the season, your Virginia Tech, your Florida State, your Duke in the ACC championship game, and then eventually Oklahoma. Those elite teams, that's where, like, you're splitting hairs between Clemson and the elite teams, which is amazing to say. Clemson obviously, many times could the average to below average teams they could beat in 5 innings. It was no big deal. But those elite teams, they, for whatever reason, last year, if you look at the schedule, they just could not figure out that pitcher before the pitcher before their hitters figured out Clemson's pitcher. I don't know if that makes any sense. Let me say it again. Clemson's hitters just took a little bit longer to figure out the elite pitchers than the other teams took to figure out Valerie and Millie Thompson. So that was kind of, to me, the different. It was honestly a lot of times, if you notice, like the seventh inning, or you know how they say in baseball, you're a big baseball fan. I I don't watch it as much, but it's like the third time through, you know what I mean, in the batting order. Well, in
Mhm.
softball, there's only 7 innings. So that third time through is honestly, a lot closer to the end of the game. So that third time through is very crucial, because if they figure you out just even a batter before you do, then, that could be the difference. And that's what I felt like from, if you look at last year, I could summarize it in, when they played most of the majority of the games, they dominated. When they got to the elite games, they just were just one, half an inning behind those elite teams for whatever reason.
No, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about it that way, but, when you played those elite teams last season, Clemson was in virtually every single one of those games, and it
Yeah.
was a game that was decided late in the game in those final innings. So, and like you mentioned, on this schedule, you have a lot of those elite teams to where you can slowly start to build and get some wins under your belt before you get to that postseason. We'll get to one opponent we have this weekend, number 13 Oregon. This opening classic that they have, there's some solid opponents there. So I'm excited to see right out the gate how well this team is prepared.
Yeah, I think, obviously, Liberty, I'm looking at the schedule right now. They're gonna be going to Clearwater, which, shameless plug here, it's going to be on 105.5 The Roar. It's going to be Reedy Thompson, or I mean, Reedy Davenport, the third baseman from last year. She's going to be calling in on color on the game. And so I'm really excited just to listen to her and get her perspective, just being removed from the team, just last season. So, but she'll be there. And as you mentioned, Oregon, one of the better teams in the country. I'm not sure where they're. I'm trying to see where they're ranked right now. Are they in the top 10,
One of the
or
polls that I pulled from, at least, they're 13th.
yeah, 13? Okay, so yeah, so Clemson is 7th, they're 13th, so they're gonna be up. I mean, that to me, if I'm circling the Clearwater tournament, that's a tough game. Liberty beat them by 1 run last year. That's a tough game. Missouri's not an easy one either. But that initial tournament is going to be telling. Then they got to go to Mexico, and they got to play Utah and Auburn right after that. So, I mean, again, this non-conference lineup, if they can make it through with getting some of these key wins earlier on in the season, to me, that gives me even more confidence, going into the ACC schedule, and then into the ACC tournament, because there are obviously some two big teams in the ACC that Clemson has got to face and get over the hump with.
And you bring up the ACC championship, or just a tournament in general. Heading towards season 5 of this program, there's not been many humps that this team can't get over. One of which, though, is winning that ACC tournament. And there's been teams like Duke and Florida State in their way there. What are What are your expectations this season for the softball program?
Oh man, I try not to like put too big of expectations on a team because I do that with football, as you know, and you do it with your other teams, and I don't want to get disappointed. I want them to live up to the hype for sure. But this is what's interesting is that this team and John Rittman does a really good job of like finding where he needs to fill a gap with some solid transfer players. He's obviously recruited really well. They've got a superstar, girl as a pitcher, and then that's coming in as a true freshman, and then they've got their two transfers. So you've got Alex Brown, who it's debatable. She'll be shortstop or third base, depending on where in her and Aaliyah Logaleo, match up well. I think she'll be shortstop, to be honest. I think she would probably be able to cover more ground, than Logaleo. I think it would be good to have her at the corner. Obviously, not necessarily her original position. I think, in high school, Logaleo was like an outfielder, but, she's played infield very well. I think Reedy was third base last year. I could see Alex Brown playing third base. I could see Logaleo playing third base, and then Lindsey Garcia being left field. I think that's where they had her in the fall. Those two girls are going to be key for this team in 2024. Because again, you've got to be able. When I look at the last year and I look at this team, I look at this roster, and I think about Valerie, right? It and I hate to just be so much add so much pressure to this, but it's really there. I mean, this is Valerie's last season. And this is a lot of the girls last season. There's a lot of girls in there that this is their senior season. I don't think you're going to see Clark or Logaleo or Valerie after this, right? Ariel Oda. There's a couple of girls. I think Jojo Hyatt. There's a couple of girls that this is kind of their last stand, right? And so they got a ton of seniors this time. They've all grown up. A lot of them started from team zero, and like played no games, just had a jersey, just did practice. So it's very special for these girls to kind of finish the story. They're knocking on the door, so they want to knock on that door and get through that door, right? And first of all, it starts with Valerie, um, and really just rallying around her. And can they get other batters around her? I think Logaleo can do it. I think Brown can do it. I think Garcia can do it. I think Mackenzie Clark, if she can stay consistent and be a key at the top of the order, it'll be key for me. I think the experts out there that study softball way more than me, they have them tied for second in the ACC with Duke. Florida State is still going to be. They don't play them in the regular season, so that's good. There's no Florida State draw in the regular season, but they do have to play Duke, I believe. Still, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. They got Duke still, um, and Louisville, Notre Dame, not pushovers either, but they have no Virginia Tech either in the regular season. So I think that they'll be able to get into the ACC tournament as a higher seed. I think they'll be able to fight, hopefully, to that ACC championship game. And really, it's to me. I want to see them get to the ACC tournament. I want to see them win the ACC tournament this year. Can they do it? I mean, let's not pretend that Florida State's not going to be a huge obstacle to get over. They still got a lot of their big bats and their good pitchers there. So the Seminoles are still the king of the ACC, the queen of the ACC, if you will. But Clemson's coming, and hopefully they will give them a run for it.
Absolutely, and you referenced, Lindsey Garcia, the Auburn transfer.
Mhm.
That's a game that I kinda have circled in next week's tournament just with the previous 2 seasons, Clemson has eliminated Auburn, from the Clemson Regional. You face each other in a early season tournament, and she's switched sides. She's a different Tiger this year, so I'm kinda excited to see how that all, shakes out next weekend in the tournament in Mexico.
So I did when um, I was just being a fan, me. I'm just a fan in the outside, right? But I did yell at her from the outfield and I said, "Hey, who's the better Tigers?" And she said, "Oh, Clemson all the way." And I said, "All right, all right." So she's a full on Clemson with us right now.
Sounds good. So, last week, I had some technical difficulties. I don't know if you saw or not, Morgan, but I recorded an entire episode last week and was unable to use it. So we're going to
Oh, I've been there,
recycle.
bro.
We're going to recycle the poll of the week from 2 weeks ago that no one has heard the results from. So this
Okay.
week's poll of the week, if you don't follow Nachos and Analysis on Twitter, please do so at Nachos_analysis. But the poll of the week was excluding Valerie Cagle because, as we've already talked about, she is that impact player for Clemson. Who will be Clemson's most impactful player this season? The options were Mackenzie Clark, Aaliyah Logaleo, Maddie Moore, and Abby Vieira. Do you have any takes on this before I reveal the results, Morgan?
Well, I saw the poll. I have you guys on notifications on X, so I follow you pretty much all the time. Any posts you have on X, so I appreciate what you guys do out there. I love your graphics, of course. Being a graphic guy at heart, I think that if you are having to pick between those, it's very difficult. I would say probably most people picked Mackenzie Clark because she's kind of the second star behind those two. So of that list you gave me, I would probably say most people probably picked Mackenzie Clark, and I'll give you a secret. I picked her as well on the poll.
Yep, most people did lean that direction. The way the poll shook out, Abby Vieira with 2% of the vote, Maddie Moore 12%, Aaliyah Logaleo 33, and with 53% of the vote, Mackenzie Clark. But
Now
uh,
I'll tell you this. So Abby Vieira, super tall, by the way. I
mhm.
mean, I'm like just looking up at her, like, wow, you're crazy. A big time athlete from California, I believe. But she's one of those girls that like she just needs to stay healthy, right? I mean, they have a rotation with JoJo Hyatt, but Abby would be a key player to just if she could. And I'm not even saying getting hot because it's a long season, right? I mean, anybody can just get hot for a couple of games. I'm saying be that consistent, reliable hitter for Clemson, and stay healthy would be a huge help. And she's probably not going to be on Sports Center or anything like that. Catchers they always get neglected, right? But I would say she could be somebody who, if she could stay healthy, stay consistent, she might be a bigger impact than any of those girls on the list. I hate to you take anything away from them. Your superstar outfielder, your center fielder is going to get all the shine and she's got the cool sunglasses and everything. So she's going to get all the looks and everything. But I'll tell you this, I was going to comment on the X post and say Alex Brown. Now I know she's a former Tar Heel, so Clemson fans don't get on me, picking a Tar Heel, but she's a Tiger now, right? So, and she was like the best hitter on her team. And the Tar Heels were a difficult team to beat last year. So Clemson picked, her up. And again, really 2024 to me is about protecting Valerie in the lineup, having other people around her to where you can't just walk Valerie, because you got somebody right after her that's going to, be a big hitter. And I think that was, what they've been missing ever since, gosh, the girl from Furman, I can't remember, Gumbarda, Marissa Gumbarda, you know, the first year Marissa was here, she was kind of that one, like, hey, you can't walk Valerie because Marissa's coming up. And they really haven't had that since then. So getting somebody after Valerie and even in front of Valerie to really protect her in the lineup to where you got to stay on your toes. You can't just, you have to pitch at her.
Absolutely. So shout out to everybody who participated in the poll. We appreciate it. We're going to post these each week, Monday, and get your voice heard. Participate in the poll. If you disagree with the options I give you, we might just read your response on air. So we got a lot of those during football season. But let's preview some real softball. We have softball starting. We're recording on Tuesday. This episode is out Wednesday. So tomorrow the Tigers open the season in the leadoff classic. So just a quick run through of the schedule real fast. They'll open the season with Missouri State at 7 o'clock Thursday night. Friday at 7 o'clock, they'll face Indiana, Liberty at noon on Saturday, a doubleheader on Saturday, and the second portion of that doubleheader, number 13, Oregon, is 7 p.m. And then they'll wrap up the tournament 10 a.m. bright and early against Missouri. So We've kind of already talked about some of these opponents. Which of these games kind of jumps out to you, Morgan, that you're looking forward to watching?
Well, obviously the first game because I'm just itching to see any kind of action from the girls. I want to see them get out on the field and kind of get a feel of what they're going to do, what the lineup's going to be. So the first game, of course, Thursday night is something I'm looking forward to. Obviously, as you mentioned it, I kind of glanced over that, but there that double header there makes that Saturday, February 10th, even more difficult because again, you've got Liberty who beat them by 1 run last year, and then you've got Oregon who is a top, what at 13th in the country. So, I'm curious how um, John Rittman's going to play that. Obviously it's early on in the season, but you got 2 games back to back, and then Thursday, Friday, right, and then you're coming in. This is what's kinda different from baseball. I don't know if baseball does something like these kinda tournaments. Maybe they do, Drew, do they?
There are not quite to this extent, but there are some. It's not quite as prominent.
That's what I learned from being a softball dad is, like, we went to our first all-star tournament this last summer, and I mean, you're gonna get half a hot dog, you gotta go play another game. You got one game at 10 a.m., eat half a hot dog for lunch and go play your next game because you got 15 minutes, you gotta get back on the field. So obviously it's not that drastic with the 12 p.m. and 7 p.m., but it kind of feels that way with softball and how they do their a lot of double headers. It's more common than it is in baseball, I think. But yeah, to me, that kind of worries me a little bit. It's earlier on in the season. You don't know. There's got some rust there, here and there. You got to see what's going to happen. So my calendar this weekend is circled on that day. I make sure I have my Grubhub or whatever ready because I don't want to leave the house to make sure I watch that.
Yeah, that's 2 tough opponents, and doing some research on this today. Noon against Liberty on Saturday. They were 44 and 22, only lost 5 games in the conference last season. They defeated Clemson at home last year. They defeated the number 2 national seed UCLA in their own regional last season to advance to supers. And then, as we mentioned, Oregon, they advanced from the Fayetteville regional, and ultimately fell to number 9 Oklahoma State. But 2 strong opponents. Um,
Yeah.
this
See,
is
so when you go back and look at that Liberty game, from last year, that's a game that was kind of mentioning with Valerie. I've said this on the radio, and sometimes I think unfair. I don't position it correctly, but sometimes Valerie is leaned on, at least last year, to she was in the game too long, right? They lost it, hits 7 to 8, right? Runs 4 to 5, right? But if you look at the inning by inning, it was Clemson was leading 2-1 into the 6th inning, and then 4-1 going into the 7th inning, and then, Valerie gave up 4 runs in the 7th inning, and they left her in. And that was something that happened, in other games as well later on in the season. I just felt like, later on if you're gonna rely on Valerie, Valerie is obviously the best player in the country. She's number 1, player of the year, right? But, they gotta help her. It can't just be all of Valerie in some of these critical games out there. So yeah, just one of those things where I'd like to see some improvement from Clemson, being able to, maybe rotate her in the pitching, or maybe help her out more in the batting. I don't know. It's just helping Valerie for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There, you could definitely tell that was the case throughout the season last year. And then I can't remember the exact scenario because the final game with Oklahoma that eliminated them for the tournament. I
Oh,
was
I don't
listening.
want let's not talk about that one. Let's not so I watched it with my daughter, and before I even talk about that one, Virginia Tech, they had the same game. It was 4 to 5. Clemson lost. Valerie went all the way to basically almost the end of the game, and they scored 5 runs in the end of the game. And it's like one of those things where I almost want to call it like a Bobby Cox moment, like you just left him in just a little bit too long. And no knock on Valerie. I'm not trying to say Valerie can't handle it. She's not the best player in the world. For sure, she's those things. But again, not perfect, right? Um, and the Oklahoma game, oh, like I said, I don't want to even talk about it because I get emotional because I mean, Like, I just remember my daughter and I just sitting on the couch, like, holding each other, like, "Just one more pitch. Just one more pitch." And I'm not gonna say it. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say
Yeah. I
it.
thankfully, I was not sitting on the couch watching it. I had to listen to it on the radio, but I remember in that moment thinking the same thing. Like we've relied on her a lot, and you just felt for her in that moment,
Mm,
giving up that hit there. So,
mm.
but anyways, this is a new season, and
Yeah.
we've turned the page on that. So,
Right.
still, Oklahoma still will be a huge force to be reckoned with. This,
Well, as you and I talked about, I mean, let's not get drawn Oklahoma. Okay,
yeah,
that was the most unlucky thing to have happen, right? Get drawn Oklahoma. It's like, okay, well, the best team in the country, they've hit 100 more hits than you, they've struck out 100 more people than you, they've had 100 less runs than you scored against you, and you got to draw them before you even get to the championship game. Ah, forget that. Like,
yeah.
just get a better draw. That's the thing.
Yeah, hoping for a better draw this year. I'm hoping to make my first trip to the Women's College World Series this season. So,
Oh, that'd be
Morgan,
fun.
yeah, Morgan, I appreciate you taking some time to join the show. Tell the listeners where they can hear you and follow you on X.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Again, on 105.5 The Roar Thursday morning with Mickey Plyler as his producer. I do also a night show during football season, but you can check me out over on X at The Morgan T Show. And right now, work is kind of busy, so I haven't really done much on YouTube, but The Morgan Thomas Show on YouTube. When I can finally find some time, I'll throw some videos back up out there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Morgan, and looking forward to maybe running into you out there at McWhorter Stadium this season.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.